Actually, let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into comics as a creator? I know you told this story a million times, but we still like to hear it.
I answered an ad in the Village Voice. It used to be in the 80s, you got to Manhattan and you got the Voice and you found a job and an apartment. And so I found an apartment and a job through the back pages of the Village Voice. I went up to the Marvel offices, met Jim Shooter, didn't know anything about comics, but I was an artist. So I drew, and I was an art historian, and so I just started rattling on about pop culture and Warhol and Lichtenstein as if I vaguely knew like something about the imagery of comics. I wrote about how, like, the trains, the graffiti. I've seen the Hulk on the A train. I didn't know what I was talking about. And Jim Shooter hired me despite the fact that I was just a bullshit artist.
Do you remember the comic that made you go, oh, okay, this is cool, I like this?
Yes. Artists would come in with their artwork, and it was when I first started seeing Walt Simonson's Thor. Walt Simonson's Thor was the very first comic I read where I was like, how am I gonna wait 30 days for the next one? And I got really hooked. It was so exciting. And I learned about the lineage of Kirby from Walt, and it was the very first comic that made me realize that, that whole waiting for a month for the next story was going to be torture.
So you came into Marvel as an editor, right? Or doing editorial, I should say.
Yeah.
But in general, you've done, of course, filmmaking, you've done all sorts of stuff, but you have done a lot of other editing stuff too. What is your philosophy or your attitude towards editing? What is your editing style, I guess?
I mean, for the most part, you have to find good talent and then get out of their way. But step in when, and it's, the basics. What I like to do is teach the basic principles of a good story. What's a good story? A good story, the Aristotelian thing is a conflict, put obstacles in the pathway, rises to a climax, develop characters. The characters should always enter the room doing something that is their essence. You and I both walk into a room differently. And then, you teach the basics, and then if the writer wants to, reinvent the wheel and not have any of that stuff, fine, if it works. So I'm a student of like Antonioni and, like the filmmakers who made brilliant films where someone just seemed to meander, Walkabout, The Passenger. But you need to really know what you're doing to strip a story of the easy stuff that makes you, you put a body in a trunk of a car, everybody's going to want to follow that story.
Right.
And there's a bit of a cheat to that, So basically you hire good people and then you get out of their way and you step in if you think the story isn't working for some reason, or you see something, you're like, oh, there's a theme here that would be cool. Do you want to pull that out? And I mostly worked with, so Louise Simonson kind of trained me to work with Chris, and Chris had this phenomenal imagination. So you would just sit down with Chris and he would give you, hundreds of stories, and your job was really to go, that's a good one, that's not a good one, that's a good one, that's not a good one. And he'd be making these charts and arrows and, so he was really easy to work with. So I learned that from Louise Simonson, her editing style. And then when I was assistant editor to Al Milgram, Al used to just throw a piece of vellum over a comic page and he would redraw. So say you have someone flying, but you couldn't fit the foot in the panel, and so the foot's cut off. You do not get a sense of lift. So he would show, if you want people to really understand this person's surging, you gotta like redraw it. So, and then when you did a cover, you'd run down to John Romita Sr.'s office, and because it's weird, it's two people clashing is not that easy to do, because where are you going to put your camera? They have to be smashing each other head on, because otherwise someone's back is to you, and then add a third character in there. There's a whole scheme to designing a powerful fight cover. And John Romita Sr. would also do the slap the vellum over. It's like, you know, clear, it's like tracing paper,
Right,
and redraw and teach the artist the tricks. And then so over the years, I learned how to edit the storyboards from Al Milgrom and John Romita Sr. I learned how to edit stories from Louis Simonson. So, you know, it was like Marvel had a kind of mentor tank where you learn by osmosis.